We want to talk about the doctrine of the Trinity, okay? A foundational doctrine of Christianity is that we believe in one God in three persons. One God in three persons. Not three gods, but three persons. You say, I don't understand that. Well, it's it's not easy. God's a very complex person. When there's things when we talk about God, there's things that it's hard to comprehend, isn't it? We're never, and the thing about it is, we can never comprehend God. But we can't have a knowledge of God. That means I take the knowledge of God and I just believe it. I don't understand all the details of it, but I can believe the Bible. I understand it, the kind of book it is, and I believe it. So we want to look a little bit tonight about the doctrine of the Trinity. The first part of it is just a little foundational stuff here I want to give us. And the first thing I want to do is just start to, before we just dive into some of the great teachings of the Trinity and stuff, we're going to look at maybe some non-Christian views. What does the world believe about things? Well, here's some of the things, very easy to think. First of all, there's an atheistic view. Atheistic view denies the existence of any God. Okay, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in anything. Why don't you? Well, I just don't. But they don't ever stop and think about what they're saying. But a lot of people consider themselves atheists. And basically, out of atheism is grown. We talked about creation a moment ago. Out of atheism grew evolution. Basically, people say, "Oh, I don't believe in the existence of God, so that sounds like a good thing for me." And so science picked that up and they begin to run with that. Then there's the agnostic view that holds that existence of God and nature of God are unknown and unknowable. Well, there may be God, just don't know it. Agnostic means, Gnostic means no. The prefix in front of that means no. So no knowledge. Gnostic means knowledge, and all means no knowledge. So a person says, I acknowledge. Agnostic says, well, I don't know anything. So I don't think that's a good thing either, is it? The third thing is a polytheistic view that holds there are many gods. Now that throughout the ages has always been very popular. Well, I don't know about one God, there's a bunch of gods. And down through the years, the Romans had bunches of gods, and the Greeks had bunches of gods, the Babylonians had bunches of gods. And so they basically formed gods for everything. And a lot of that's been, when God come along and began to give us His Word and began to outline things, the nation of Israel was told that there's one God. And see, that made them very distinct from every other group of people, because every other group of people had all these other ideas about all these different gods. So the nation of Israel that God formed was, first of all, very unique. They only had one God. Okay, that's the bottom, one of the main doctrines of the Old Testament. Then there's a dualistic view that assumes that there are two distinct and eternal gods, basically one good God and one evil God. You got a good God, everything's good, you got an evil God, they're always fighting out who's the good and evil, which is, of course, not true. There's one God, and we have evil. Okay, evil is there. It's, in this world, there's a God of this world. He's not God like God, but he's what's worshipped, and that's the devil, and he's the epitome of evil, but he's not the God of the universe of anything, and he doesn't have more power than our God, and he's already doomed to eternal damnation. And then there's the pantheistic view. This believes that all things are merely aspects, modification of parts of the one eternal self-existing being or principle, that God is everything and everything is God. That's a very popular view, especially in a lot of the Far Eastern religions, and this rock is God, this tree out here is God, and that flea is God, that's God, everything's God, and so they don't distinct the creation from the Creator. We believe there's a Creator who created the trees and all these things, but the trees are not God. We understand when we look at the Bible, God is a person, not an inanimate object. Okay, so pantheism is in things. It's in a lot of artists, singers. They write songs, and John Denver wrote "Country Roads," greatest song ever written, a secular song. Even when I was in Malta, people were singing "Country Roads." It's a world anthem. I mean, I couldn't believe it. But he was a pantheist. A lot of his songs is about God in the mountains and God in this and God in that. He was a very pantheistic thing, and it came through some of his songs. And a lot of those guys did. And then there's the deistic view, and this basically, I'll just give you a little short version of the deistic view, is basically that there was a God one time, and He created things, but then He just sort of took His hands off everything and then let everything run on His own. Okay, we're on our own now. So we have to sort of pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and do our own thing, because there was a God who started things, but he really is not in charge of anything now. He doesn't sustain all things. And some people, even in the, Thomas Jefferson was a man who believed in God, but basically most of the people say his view was deistic. And Thomas Jefferson did not believe, for instance, about Jesus, any of the supernatural events. In fact, he didn't believe in any miracles. That couldn't be true because really God's not involved with anything anymore. So Thomas Jefferson, I didn't see miracles, it must not have happened. And so he was more of a deistic view, and there's a lot of folks like that. Of course, we believe there's a creator God, as we get through our study here, who not only created things, but very much involved, and he's the sustainer of all things too. He holds all things together. So God is involved with his creation. So these views are some of the views that you see in the world. And I want to give a few things here about some philosophical arguments for the existence of God. Now put it, as Christians, we believe God by faith. We don't need any philosophical arguments, okay? We don't need to be taught things, but the God says you must believe God. Let me just read there what Hebrews 11:6 says. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and he that is rewarded that diligently seek him. We just believe that God says, okay, this is the Bible that teaches about God, and I believe God exists, and you don't have to prove it to me. And that's a believer. Now here's some things, and I have this in your pack. There are some of these things, and basically this is not for you as a believer, but you may be talking to somebody who's not a believer, and you may be able to try to share with them some arguments till they get to the point that they become a believer. To become a believer, they don't need these things. But as some person who doesn't believe the Bible, who doesn't believe anything, this may help you understand and teach them about God. And so here's a few of these understand. First of all, the universal belief argument. Basically, since all the mankind probably has some kind of an idea of God, where there must be a God in the first place. That's an argument. Where did the idea of God come from, other than God? Because every civilization has some kind of an idea of God. Now, they may not believe the God that we believe, but they have an idea of God. Where did that come from? Where we who believe God, believe that God we're made a spirit, as a body, soul, and spirit, and we have a God consciousness. He gives an illustration here of a very famous person, Helen Keller. And if you ever know the Helen Keller story, she was blind and deaf. It tells she didn't have the sense of smell or anything. And through a lot of work, they worked with this lady, as you know, the story, that she began to be able to talk and be able to communicate. And then when he started to talk to her about God, this is what she said. She was told of God and his loving in sending Christ to die on the cross. She is said to have responded with joy, I always knew he was there, but I didn't know his name. Here's somebody who didn't hear anybody talking about God. She couldn't see anything that was created. But she said, I just knew there was God. You know why? And that's a good little bit of an argument there for the fact that there's a God consciousness in man. Now that doesn't make you saved just because you know it, but there is a God consciousness. And that's the reason people search for God, and Satan puts all these false gods before people to try to fulfill that need, which never fills it, but Satan tries to counterfeit our God all the time. And then there's the cosmological argument. The argument says that every effect must have an adequate cause. So it's cause and effect. Okay, here was effect, it must be a cause. What caused this? Well, God must have caused this. Nice little illustration of this. The famous Sir Isaac Newton had built a model of the solar system, it says in here, and a large golden ball representing the sun was in the center. Around it there were smaller planets, and everything was in beautiful precision, and it sort of even moved around, and it was a beautiful illustration of the creation system. And it says he had a friend come and said, Mr. Newton, what an exquisite thing. He said, who made it for you? And Newton said, nobody. Nobody, yeah, that's right. I said nobody. All these balls and cogs and belts and gears just happen to come together, and wonder of wonders, by chance they begin revolving on the set orbits with perfect timing. Of course, he was just trying to prove a point. Somebody had to do that. And we see this universe operating so precisely. I wonder how that happened. Well, it didn't happen by accident. And then the teleological argument, some of these a little bit overlap, I think, in their meaning, but the argument says that every design must have a designer, and that's sort of the same as the Sir Isaac Newton one. If something is designed, surely somebody was the designer, and that's nothing happens accidentally. I mean, to think that the universe could happen accidentally with such precision, I mean, how would you begin to think that? And how could, out of a slimy pit, could something accidentally become living, and then become living and kept changing into certain creatures, into certain creatures, into certain creatures, into man, and all the wisdom of all the body working the way it does, and there had to be a female and a male and all this, and how did that all just happen? Someday, I don't know, I don't think we'll live long enough in this earth. I think the Lord's going to come back, but one of these days, people's going to, if you live long enough, you think people say, well, that was the stupidest thing we've ever come up with. Because when they stop and think about it, and I believe, I can't see how you could ever be a Christian and be an evolutionist. And some people say, well, I'm a Christian evolution. I don't think you're a Christian. You may be religious evolutionist. I can't think of you. Because every true Christian that I have ever known, and even if they were taught evolution, and I've had teachers in my Christian universities I went who grew up in secular teaching and taught evolution. As soon as they become a Christian, they said, that's absurd. I had one teacher, he was an amazing mind, he became a great creation scientist and everything. And he said, I was so mad that I paid all that money for education for years and they lied to me the whole time. I was just so angry at it. I had to go back and learn the truth now. But it seems like but that's just the unsaved mind. The ontological argument, man has an idea of the most perfect being, so thus there must be a perfect being or someone. Remember, these are just philosophical arguments about God. Then the anthropological argument says that basically, since man has a conscience and a moral nature, a man must be a maker somewhere that created that. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but man does have a conscience, and it can be all kinds of problems with that conscience. It could be seared, it can be hardened, it can be formed in different ways. But somewhere along the line, where did we get this consciousness at? That there may be something right or wrong. If we were not moral beings, if we were just basically just objects like mud who've now got lungs and breathing, why do we have any kind of moral teaching and thinking anyway? Why couldn't we just, why do we just don't think like a rock? But our society has become so secular, the conscience of people are getting so hard is about what they're thinking like. Don't you just, every day we turn on the television and people murder somebody. Why did they murder him for? Well, I don't know, I just didn't like him. Just thought it would be something fun to do. That conscience of that person has got so seared, there's no identity that person is a living soul. You see, and I know the scientists in our secular government would never admit it, and our education system would never admit it, but they have taught people that they are no better than animals for 50 years. And so what are we acting like? We're acting like animals. What does animals do in the world they live in? They just eat and kill each other with no moral thought about it. Why does a lion eat another animal? He didn't go off berserk. He's just a lion. He's an animal. He doesn't have a moral conscience. He wasn't made in the image of God. And you see, we're made in the image of God. And when we don't teach our people and our children that they're made in the image of God, that conscience that God gave them pretty soon becomes very marred and becomes very foggy and very seared. And they begin to believe what they're being told by the unbelieving world. And so we've created a society. I watch the news every morning. They're sitting here talking, well, what's wrong with society? I heard that this morning. I was watching the news this morning, and what is wrong with our society? They were big round table discussions. Well, we're acting like a bunch of heathens. We're being taught we're a bunch of heathens. That's what's happened. That's the problem, isn't it? What's the scripture argues for existence of God? The answer is none. The Bible doesn't try to prove there's God. The Bible just starts up, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. That's what he starts with. He doesn't say, now here's 10 reasons why you should believe in God. He just says, here's God. Just take a look at him. And that's the thing about the Bible. It doesn't go into any kind of long instructions about 10 points. It just says, look at God. He created things. Okay, look at God. He can destroy things, and then look at God. He can rebuild things back. Look at God. He can change the lives of people. Look at God. He can do this and do that. That's what the Bible's all about. Look at God. He can take an awful sinner and turn him into a great saint. I mean, look at that's God. So that's what the Bible teaches throughout the whole thing. And so we want to get to know the God of the Bible then. And one of the ways you get to know somebody is through his names, isn't it? And God has if we want to introduce ourselves to God and say, well, what's your name? Well, God has more than one name, doesn't he? The names of God in the Bible help us know who God is. You know, when I talk to somebody, they'll say, well, my name is such, and I'll say, well, my name is this. So we got to know each other. That's my name. Well, God throughout the Bible, and God uses a lot of names. And there's some basic names, and then there's some branched off the name. And let's look at some of these names. Again, we're giving a foundation about God. We're going to go into some details about all the Father, Son, and Spirit. But this is just some foundations of introducing ourselves to God. One of the first names is Elohim. That's one of the most common names. And it's used 2,570 times. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Okay? It refers to God's power and might. So Elohim is one of the basic names of God, of his power and might. So when we see God in the Bible, if you lived in let's say in the Bible language days, if you was a Hebrew and Moses wrote this, and someone said, my name is Elohim, well, they'd say, well, you're a power and might. Now, sometimes we don't understand that because none of you guys named Elohim. I never did meet anybody named Elohim. But that's what it would have been. So they would have known Elohim, power and might. So we understand God's a powerful God, a mighty God. He's so powerful and mighty, he can create. You know, he can do miracles, he can change things. He's powerful and mighty. And then there's the word El, and there's a lot of different compounds of that. So we're going to look at some of the compounds of El. One of them is Elyon. This is the strongest and strong one. The strongest strong one. Sort of emphasizing, not only strong, he's the strongest of the strong ones. A couple of places is used. One's in about Melchizedek. Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God, of Elyon. Elyon, the strongest of the strong ones. And then also it's used as history's first sinner, Satan. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend to heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. I will be like the strongest of the strong one. That's what Satan say. That's what the recording of the Bible about Satan's pride. Satan wasn't interested in just being number two. We believe Satan was a created angel that had great powers and authority under God in the angelic structures. But he didn't want to be number two. He wanted to be the strongest of the strong ones. I want to be the Elyon. I want to be that one. And his pride, he tumbled and God kicked him out of the heaven. And then there's one that's connected to that is Roi. It means a strong one who sees. And I'm not going to look at the whole chapter, but chapter 16 of Genesis is about Hagar when she goes out and into the wilderness, and when God comes to her then, and she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou God seest me, you're Roi. She said, I've also here looked after him that seeth me. The God who sees. That's important to understand. God sees us. God sees us. He knows us. When you're discouraged and depressed, like little old Hagar was, and life was ruined, and she was in a big mess, and she didn't feel like living, she didn't feel like going anywhere, God said, I see you there. Let me tell you something. I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back you're important to me. And then there's one, El Shaddai. And the idea of that, he's the one as a nursing mother. He's the nourisher. In Genesis 17:1, when Abram was 90 years old and 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. I'm El Shaddai. Walk before me and be thou perfect. He needed that comfort. He had a rough time. God called him to leave his homeland when he was 75 years old, and he went through ups and downs, and God said, you're going to have this child through Sarah, and it still hasn't come, and it hasn't come, and it hasn't come. He's depressed and discouraged, and but God says, I'm the one who nourishes you. I'll give you the strength. I'll take care of you, Abraham. You can't do it your own self. You got to let me do it. And then the one, Olam, the everlasting God. All through Isaiah chapter 40 is about the great everlasting God. Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the Creator of the ends of the earth, He fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of His understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might He increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength, and they shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. The God that we serve is the everlasting God. He's got everlasting strength, everlasting power. And He can give strength to our lives. That's the reason that was where I got my title from my devotional thoughts and all my things I write, The Strength for Living, because God is the source of all of our strength. Without God, there's no strength for living. Without God, you can't mount up with wings of eagles. Without Him, there's no strength. So, we understand God. He's the all-powerful one. He's the strong one. He's the God who sees. He's the everlasting God. So that's who God is. That's who we're trying to learn about. That's who we're trying to grasp the knowledge of. We can't comprehend everything about God, but we can grasp the knowledge of God. And we can be comforted in the fact that we can know Him. He's revealed Himself to us. And the one who sits in the heavens for all of eternity, as we saw in the last class, He stepped out of eternity and began speaking the world in existence. I want to share my glory with you. And I will share my majesty with you. I'll share all my... In fact, I'll make you in my image. Isn't that great? And that's the God we know. The triune God, the Father, Son, and Spirit, known as one God, and Him who will learn. Anyone got any questions this evening as we close out? Somebody got a question or comment about the God that we've talked about here tonight? Comments? Anything? Okay, well, next time we'll pick...
God, when the creation, God said, let us make man in our image.
Yeah, we see the Trinity. We'll be looking at that verse. We see the Trinity in His making of man. Yes, we sure do. Okay, no questions? Well, we'll close this service, this section out, and so glad that you got to come tonight.